Hello there YouTube. So continue on from the other video about producing low profile right angle XLR plugs. I'm now going to do the same video about one of these, which is a TA3 or TA5 or in fact TA4 connector. They're also referred to as mini XLRs and they're about half the size and they're very useful connections. They are used certainly on this device, which is the Sound Devices 633 mixer and recorder, and on these output sockets here, X1 and X2, these are mini XLR or TA3 in this instance, and I wanted to produce a mini XLR low profile output for this, so that's what I'm going to do. A lot of the other stuff covered in the other video about preparing and the equipment used is in that video. In the interest of keeping this one short, I'm not going to go over all that ground again. You can watch that video, the link is in the description. So we're going to be producing one for this. So let's start off. The first thing to do is to actually get the empty plug, the barrel of the plug, put it in the location it's actually going to be, and have a look as to where you want the cable to exit. You need to think about this reasonably carefully, because once you've drilled it, it's done. And so you want to really think about where's the cable going to exit and where's it going to go. I want mine coming not directly vertical here, but I want it coming off at a slight angle. So I can look on the actual plug, which you can bring it close to the camera here, and it will probably be about where the N of Reen is. Reen produce these. Switchcraft also produce these, but I prefer the Reen ones. So I want to make that drill hole just about where the N is there. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, that's roughly whereabouts mine's going to be. So I'm going to make my drill hole there. Okay, so as with the other video, I've got my electric drill ready. I've got my plug here. Again, you can use a vise for this, but it's quite handy to have a board like this. It's got a groove cut in it. I've held it down with a quick grip, a clamp like this. These plugs, it's worth noting, are very delicate, and they really are like a tin can. So if you squeeze them too tightly with a quick grip, it will just crush the thing. Again, when you're drilling, you've got to be very careful. It's so tempting for the thing just to shear off and bits of metal to come off. So as we're going to drill in now, we need to be very careful. Again, like with the XLR, I'm doing a pilot hole with a small 2mm drill bit, and then going up to my 4mm drill bit once I've got that pilot hole there. The 4mm is even harder. We'll come to that in a second, but that's the size of the cable I'm using. So we're just going to get the drill just on the end there where we knew we wanted to mark it, and we're just going to go very gently into this. The plug is super soft, so yeah, we just need to go nice and gently. That's taking it there quite nicely, and again, no need to rush this whatsoever. There we go, through. So that's good, and that's worked well. So now we'll just go on to the 4mm drill bit, and we'll do the same thing again. This time, it's going to be really tempting for this to move around and kind of, get in trouble. As I say, if you squeeze it too hard and make it a really firm grip onto the board, you'll bend it. If you don't grip it too hard, it moves around. It's kind of a catch-22, but you just go easy with it and don't rush it, and it should be okay. We'll start off our hole just like the other one and go nice and gently, just using the weight of the drill. I'm not pushing on the connector here. There we go, nice and through. So now, as you saw there, I really was just using the weight of the drill. I wasn't pushing any force onto the actual plug itself. If I did, you're in real danger of a chunk of the plug actually coming off and shearing and stuff. It's quite difficult to get these to be super neat, these connections, certainly with DIY kit. And as with the other video, this is the same as that. I don't have pro level kit here. This is all just stuff that can be bought from local hardware shops and that kind of thing. So, I find that these work. Again, just like with the XLR one, we're just going to neaten it up. And for this, I just use a screwdriver here, and I'll just run it in the gap there like that kind of thing, and just try and make sure there's no particularly sharp edges as it goes through. And there we have it, the hole's drilled just where the N is. I'm just going to get it to focus on it. So yeah, there's the hole just where the N is, looking good. Plug not bent as well, which is of key importance. As with the other video, we've now got all of our bits ready here. We've got our plug with the hole drilled. I'm going to set it just into my solder helping hand thing here. We've got the actual back of the TA3 connection here. This is going to go inside. The kind of wiring I'm doing on this, it really depends on how your TA3 is wired. You need to check the manual of whatever it is that you're making it. I'm actually connecting these two together with the ground and the negative, and then my positive connection is going down here. So the blue cable to here, white and ground to these two, which I'll bridge together with a bit of solder. Again, this will just really depend on whatever application you're using it for. You need to check the manual for the wiring. So we'll get the plug into the actual socket there. We'll put it in, and I want to just make sure as you look inside that, you'll be able to see the plug is just next to where the hole is. If you let it go all the way down, you just got a lot further away. It's much more buried to actually work in there like that. So if you go, when you actually grip it into something like this, you can just actually tease it up a bit, so you're kind of cheating a little bit. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to do the ground and white cable first. They go along the top there. And after a bit of fiddling around, we decided that. So we're going to get these two going through the hole there. And then what we need to do is manipulate the cable inside the joint in such a way that, first of all, the ground and white there is kind of set up at the correct angle to actually make this connection, which we can do, and then get it set up on the stand here and get it so it's going to be ready to actually take it. You can do this by a mixture of manipulating the cable outside to move it around and using tweezers to connect the two. Hopefully, because of the way we're going in the side here, if I move this blue cable out of the way a little bit, I can actually get it to bridge across both connections, doing just what I want, and have it soldered in place. But you just got to use some tweezers and move it around a little bit to get that to happen. It's just about in the right place now. So with a little solder on the end of my soldering iron, I can get it to take the first one on this furthest away, and that's taken that there. And then with a little bit of bending, I can get it to take the other one as well. It's a little bit of trial and error with these, and they are very fiddly. Notice I've got the very thin tip on the end of my soldering iron. And that's good. That's taken both now, so that's cool. So now what I can do is with the blue cable, which is the positive, that's the signal I'm interested in. And again, you need to look at the manual for the wiring of yours. But you bend the cable to get it into, and the actual tip end there of my blue positive cable, I'm just going to shove this in a bit more actually so that it makes life a little easier. It is quite tight in there. And remove some of the tin solders a bit too much on that pin. There we go. So we're looking good. I'm just going to get to focus on here. So that's our double connection there. We're going to shove this in a bit more, pull through that blue wire, and then we're going to solder that. Okay, so with a bit of bending and manipulation, I've got my blue cable to where I want it to be now. So I'm now just going to heat up that connection point and get this positive cable soldered into the connection there. That's just taking it there, so that's good. Now, because it's so tight in there, you need to be very confident that there's not any bridged connections. The easiest thing to do now is to actually push the connector using some tweezers with them open, push the connector into its socket and let it take the extra cable in there. And sort of check that it's not bridging anywhere or it's not, and you can do that by getting it in, pulling it out again and having a good look in there. It's just a case of trial and error with this. It's made a pretty good connection. I think I could clear it up a bit, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so now I'm happy with the connections and the soldering element of it is done. I'm going to push the cable in a bit further and just help feed it in. And using my tweezers with them open, pushing on the edges of the plug, just to push it right down so it's right at the front there. And it's pushed right into the plug there. That should go in like that. And that's all good. Now, if it's possible at this moment, it is quite a good idea if you can, especially with little zip ties like this, if you can feed it through, and you have to be quite patient to do this, you curve up the end of the zip tie. If you can get a zip tie around the cable, it really does act as the most amazing strain relief. It just stops it from coming out. Now, this is a real fiddly little operation. And what I can suggest doing is getting the zip tie bent so it's almost in a curve like that. poking it in and around the cable, and then using some very fine tweezers to try and get it out. Now, I won't bore you on the video trying to show you how to do this, because as you can imagine, it's just a case of trial and error. I mean, we might be in luck actually. But yeah, you just have to kind of fiddle it through, try and then grip the other end of the cable. Ah, there we go. We are in luck today. Pull it through like that, and then the zip tie comes around. Then you can zip tie it up. I'm just going to show you this a bit better, come off the video there. So then we can zip tie this cable tie up, and we're being in business. Now just do be careful at this moment, you don't end up yanking the soldered connection too much. You don't want to disturb your hard work from earlier. So just feed this through. I saw curve, don't know, wouldn't even go in. There we go, feed that through, and then we can zip tie it down. And then we really have got a very good form of strain relief on it. Okay, so with zip tie done up now, which you can see, I'm going to just pull it all the way through, and I'm going to chop just the end. And that's now zip tied onto that. That stops that cable. When you pull on it, that zip tie prevents it from being pulled any further out. And now I'll just twist the cable to manipulate it a little bit, and using some tweezers just to get it so the zip tie is the actual end of it is a bit buried inside there, so that when we come to gluing it, it's not going to poke out or get in the way of that. If you just gently twist the cable one way or the other, you'll normally find it will sort of go into the cavity of the plug one way. It will prefer one way than the other way. You might need to use a board and a little bit of force on this, but that's okay. So there we go. So that's fairly well held in there now, as you can see. I'll get it to focus on there. And you can see the zip tie is held in there. Okay, so with the cable all in, everything's soldered, we've got the zip tie in there as well. We're ready to go. We've got our glue gun here, nice and hot. And the glue gun, just with the XLR, is the first step here. So what I'm going to do is just squeeze in some of the glue on top of the zip tie. And this, again, is just to fill the cavity with a fairly viscous kind of glue, so it doesn't dribble down and block the exit button so that you can eject the cable. I just use some tweezers or something like that just to kind of make sure it fills in all the gaps. It's not so hot you can't touch this glue, and you've got a few stringy bits and stuff, but you can just pull these off and neaten it up a bit and get it all ready for the epoxy. So once it starts to set, you can use the tweezers to kind of shove it down a bit and really just make sure you're blocking all of it. I always quite like to leave just a couple of rings of the old thread exposed, so that when the epoxy goes in, it can kind of use those bits to really bite into and make a super strong connection. It will still make a good connection without that, but if you see some of the rings of these threads just here, if you can leave some of them exposed, the epoxy will fill into those and it will make a really nice firm grip so that it won't come out. We've got the thing pushed in all the way there. We're looking good. So it's time to prepare the epoxy. Okay, so as before, I've got my tin foil here. I've got some cocktail sticks. I've got my 2 parts of epoxy resin. This is just owl dye. It's an off-the-shelf one. There are lots of different types, and as with the XLR, you can get epoxy dye if you want to make them colourful. I'm not so fussed about that because I actually just find that I write on the plugs with permanent marker and use whiteboard marker just to rub them out. But I'm going to mix 50-50 with these two, as you're meant to. Get those in there. If I was going to use any more or less of one, I'd sometimes have a teeny bit less of the agent that makes it runny, which is often the clear one. I find that if it's too runny, it never sets super hard. So I'm just going to mix these two together with our cocktail stick here. There we go. I also, when buying the epoxy, I would look for a fast setting one, just for time and stuff, but not so quick. You can get some that sort of advertises 90 seconds, and I find that's just a bit too quick. So I'm picking this stuff up just like honey, and I'm going to dribble it into the hole there. So there's no point in rushing this bit. We've got 5 minutes set time on. Okay, yep. So with all of that dribbled in, we're just going to leave the plug now and make sure that it dries nicely. We're going to keep it upright. I filled it all in there, not rushed it, and we've got it so it just comes out of the plug a bit, so you've got a nice curve on it. So time to leave that, let it dry, and you should be ready to go.